Hello, everyone. This is Chala, Dincoy, CEO and founder of The Repositioning Expert. I am here with another edition of my podcast, Naked Marketing, where we talk about honest marketing mistakes. My guest today is Henning Schwinum. Tell us all about what you do and welcome.
Well, thank you, Chala, for having us and having me on the podcast. I spent almost my entire career leading, building, transforming sales teams in different companies, startups, mid-size, multinationals. And now I'm taking that expertise to help founders, CEOs, and owners of growth-minded companies, small businesses, to overcome their challenges in sales. And how do I do this? I started a business called Vendux, and we are a matchmaker that places seasoned sales leaders as contractors on an interim or fractional basis into companies that have a challenge in their sales and in their sales leadership position.
Mm-hmm. And are you trying mostly to get more new clients or more new sales executives to work for you, or is it both?
It's a wonderful question. It is both, because we are a marketplace, a matchmaker, and both sides have to grow in balance. It doesn't make sense to have a lot of executives and no assignments, or a lot of assignments and no executives. And so for the last 2 years, we've been growing these two sides in balance.
Mm-hmm. How has COVID affected you? Do you have a huge amount of sales executives from, declining, like hospitality and aviation kind of thing, or how has it been?
COVID affected us insofar as that companies were not interested in adding people to their staff, whether it's was a full-time employee or a contractor. Their interests between March and June, July was to get rid of people. And so we had no new assignment opportunities developed during that time period. On the executive side, the impact wasn't quite as noticeable because our focus is a lot on the B2B side, and it is a difference whether somebody is looking for their next W-2 full-time employment, or whether someone is committed to the gig economy and the 1099 assignments, often fractional or part-time. And those people that have that commitment, they might have seen a drop-off, or they did see a drop-off in their assignments as well, but it wasn't that there was a whole new number of them, quote unquote, flooding into the market.
So I'm a marketing gal, as you know. So tell me about how you're marketing to get both audiences, one, the guy who's going to give you the job, and the guy who's going to actually do the job.
Yeah, the easier part is definitely to find the executives that are in this space. Currently in the US, there are somewhere between 3,000 and 5,000 executives that are available for those gig assignments as sales leaders. They self-identify on LinkedIn the fact that they are fractional VPs of sales or available for those roles. And we started out by putting job ads into places like LinkedIn saying, hey, we're looking for fractional sales leaders. By now, we are getting most of our new executives through referrals, because we've built a network already, and it's a close-knit community. People know of each other, and so we really don't have the need to market distinctly on that side. The other side is more challenging. You asked me about COVID, and COVID was crickets. Now, post-COVID, August, September of last year, all the way to now, we've seen a great change in the acceptance of the model, and in companies willing and interested to engage executives as fractionals. And we reach them through a variety of things like networking with platforms that are focused on scaling businesses, startup businesses like venture capitalists, private equity, angel investors, other startup networks. But then we also reach out directly to founders. Anyone that started a business self-identifies on LinkedIn as a founder. And so for us, that's the channel that is most successful in connecting with people who started a business 2 or 3 years ago and who have now progressed to a point where they need a sales leader to come on board.
So that's wonderful. Now, the startup network, I imagine some of them are so startup that they can't really use your help because they're bootstrapping. So what's the size that they have to hit before they start to kind of look for your help?
We have placed sales leaders into companies all the way to pre-revenue scenarios. Mm-hmm. If you have a startup founder that doesn't really have the experience on even how to build a playbook, how to set up a process, how to message correctly to well-identified decision makers, then a fractional sales leader, someone with the experience, can help. And because it's a fractional assignment, not a full-time employment, the cost is a manageable number, and it's a shorter, less risky commitment to a 1099 contractor versus a W-2 full-time employee.
So what's the minimum time that they have to sign on?
Well, I wouldn't say that there's necessarily a minimum time. It really depends on the scenario. We have executives that are more in a coaching role, and you can coach someone well with 2 or 3 hours a week. We have executives that are in sort of business development roles where they build the framework for selling, and their 8 hours, 10 hours a week are sufficient. And then we also have executives who are leading teams of 3, 4, 5 salespeople, and that is more a 2 or 2.5 day a week type of role.
That's fabulous. I mean, is there and I'm a huge proponent of niching and super niching. Is there an industry niche that you have?
I appreciate the question, because you're right. I also believe in having a niche. Now, my niche is that I'm only focused on the sales leadership role. I'm not the business that touches every single executive role, every single functional role. I'm only focused on the sales leader. That is my niche. From an industry perspective, though, what I offer as a service is agnostic to industries. And we have placed sales leaders not only in what I call the typical clusters, the expected spaces like anything tech or anything SaaS. We've also placed people into television stations, into a automotive aftermarket manufacturer. So we've done other placements as well.
Gotcha. Well, so I'm such a huge proponent of niching that I regularly do 90-minute masterclasses, which I'm doing this week. So I invite you not to watch it, because I'm going to be completely pressing on the whole idea of super niching. Because when I worked for Pepsi, Pizza Hut, Frito-Lay for 18 years, the number one reason why I said no, why we always said no to vendors trying to sell to us, was because they just blended in with everybody who was doing the kind of same thing. So it's great that you've been able to carve a space out of, what you're doing. But typically, if I could dream, I get a client like you, and the first thing we do is we super niche them to own an entire industry, so that we can, absolutely position ourselves as thought leaders. But that's amazing. So when all those years that I worked for 18 years, I worked sometimes in sales and sometimes in marketing, because at Pepsi, they believe that you need to understand both. So, but in both positions, I used to hate the other. So, and I'm sure you were in the same position. So I'm really, really curious about your naked marketing confession. What was the biggest mistake that you made in the last year and a half of launching Vendux?
The biggest mistake was probably pretty early on, that I put too much trust into a third-party marketing agency, thinking that they would sort of solve this puzzle for me, and that I had to invest a lot of money into channels and into doing things that really didn't serve the right audience. As an example, as a professional in this space, everyone is on LinkedIn. Every one of my clients is on LinkedIn with a great profile, and every one of my executives is on there. So that is the premier place. I was told that I also had to do Instagram and Facebook. And while the same individuals may also be on those platforms, and maybe if they are generationally younger founders, they are on these platforms, but they're not there for their profession, they're there for their personal interest. And so, there was a lot of efforts into those channels that ended up being wasted.
So to be clear, when you say your biggest mistake was trusting the agency too much, they were the agency that told you to do social media aside from LinkedIn?
Correct.
Okay. Wow. So that tells me right away they didn't understand the target.
In hindsight,
yeah,
I agree. And at the same time, when you are running a marketing agency and you talk to a potential new client, I've yet to find the marketing agency that would say, hey, you know what, we really don't understand your space. You should go and talk to this company because we don't know what we're doing. No marketing agency ever will say that.
Yeah, but the funny thing is that no company will say that. And what I'm trying to teach is you need to be niched and work with niched companies. And when you're an industry expert, you work with industry experts because that's what you look for. And it doesn't mean that you need to have only one. You can sub-brand and have multiple people working on different verticals, which is, you've done that, I've done that. I do that for large companies, but for small shops, you got to focus, concentrate, and go deep. It's not to say you can't help anybody else, of course. I mean, my dentist helps anybody with teeth, but my child's dentist charges twice as much because they have a TV with Disney TV, so yeah, and toys and all that. So that is so true. So what is your recommendation to people in terms of trusting agencies? Like, you've been burned. What do you want to tell our audience to look for, or as advice?
I've definitely learned to ask more questions and better questions, and ask for examples that represent a business that is like mine before I go and trust somebody else. And that holds true not just for marketing agency, for any type of service provider or solution provider. I don't want to hear about the work they've done for Coca-Cola or Pepsi, because that size-wise doesn't apply to me. I don't want to hear about what they did for an industry that I'm not in, or a region that I'm not in. I really want to hear what they've done for a business that is very, very similar to mine, maybe even a competitor. That is something that tells me that they know the space and understand what they're doing. And in terms of anything social media, as you know, there are thousands of companies out there that claim that they'll connect you to all these potential buyers, and they've generated millions of sales in months for their existing clients. All of that is nice and dandy, but if that isn't from my space, from the area that I am in, it's irrelevant to me.
Yeah,
that's what I've learned.
That's exactly what happened to me. I mean, I'm in Canada and I work in the US. My entire funnel was speaking on stages, and I would speak for 60 minutes and close six figures in the next 60 minutes, and that was gone during COVID. So I had to completely relearn how to rebuild all those funnels through LinkedIn and through other like online means. So now all of it is coming back, thank God. And I wasted so much money on people who told me they could help me on LinkedIn. I mean, thousands and thousands. And there's very, very particular ways that, because my target is the same as yours. Potentially mine is $2 to $5 million B2B service-based CEOs. And, even on LinkedIn, they're not spending that much time. So what do we have to say to them? How do we message them? And how do we pitch to them? Even just on what we call DM trees, which is direct message trees, to get their interest and to get them into a meeting with us. So it has been, and I'm so on the same page as you. There are like thousands and thousands of companies all claiming the same thing, and none of them were able to help me until I figured out a formula, which was a mix of what I learned and what I do, because what I do is around messaging and titillating people into talking to us. So yeah, it's been a ride, as I'm sure it has for you.
Yeah, I appreciate the way you describe it, because that's how I feel about it for myself as well. It was a learning process. Yeah. It wasn't something that somebody told me to do. It was learnings. It was taking elements that have worked for others and sort of building my own approach. And, in hindsight, I would say that's exactly what you need to do as a business founder or business owner. Unless there's someone who really has the expertise in your area.
And they can shortcut you. And that's what I did, actually. I paid for a very expensive coach at the beginning of COVID when I had no money. I deferred my mortgage, and then I paid the expensive coach, and I learned from them. But I had to change it because they were more B2C. So I had to change it to my world and make it work. So that's how I'm such a huge believer in coaching, because it accelerated me in so many ways. But yeah, you got to be careful. You got to be careful who you're listening to. So give us how our viewers and listeners could reach you.
Well, they can look for me under my name on LinkedIn, or go to our website. Vendux is spelled VENDUX.org. Just so I hopefully anticipate the next question, Vendux is a play of words on two Latin terms. Venditio is sales and dux is leadership. So Vendux plays on that.
And we learned something new today. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure having you.
Thank you, Chala. It was great to be on your show.
Thank you.